All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's highly anticipated main event, Tech Savvy Collaboration, Document Formatting, and Compatibility Tips for Public Interest Attorneys. My name is Jorge Acosta Palmer, and I'm the director of the Statewide Training Initiative with Florida Legal Services. Broadcasting live from the virtual Zoom ring, it's the tech showdown you've all been waiting for. Before we get started with the action, though, let me take a moment to go over a few quick housekeeping announcements. This training is being recorded. You're going to receive a copy of this recording in an email from Zoom within 24 hours. If you don't see that email, no worries. I'm going to drop my email here in the chat just in case. Feel free to reach out to me and I'll make sure you get a copy of the recording and the materials as well. The training has been approved for 1 point general CLE credit and 1 technology CLE credit by the Florida Bar. I'll announce the code and I'll post it in the chat towards the end of the event. It will also go out on the email. Closed captions are enabled for your convenience. You can toggle them on or off by clicking on the closed caption icon and on Zoom. The event is being co-hosted by the Public Interest Law section of the Florida Bar, or PILS. If you're not familiar with PILS, make sure to check out their website. I'm going to drop the link in the chat as well. And lastly, feel free to ask any questions throughout the session. You can use either the chat, you can use the Q&A feature, so our speakers will do their best to address the questions as they come in. If for whatever reason we miss them during the presentation, we'll make sure to address them towards the end. So fair warning, have your phones ready because to be able to participate on some surveys, some QR codes may come up. So you can scan that QR code and participate in these surveys and polls. You can also type in slido.com on your browser. I'll drop that URL in the chat because you will get a code and that will prompt you to participate in the survey. That's another way to participate. Now, with those announcements out of the way, let's get to the exciting part. We're all here for an epic showdown between two tech titans. In the red corner, the manager for the Legal Services National Technology Assistance Project, please welcome Shellie Reid. And in the blue corner, representing Community Legal Services, please give a warm welcome to their Director of IT, Ellie Mattern. So, without further ado, let's get this party started. Please join me here today in welcoming our experts, Shellie and Ellie, as they step into the ring and share their insights with us. Ding ding, let the showdown begin. Ellie and Shellie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jorge. Hi, I'm Ellie. I am the Director of Technology for Community Legal Services. And as Jorge mentioned, I love questions. Feel free to ask them as we go along so we can answer them in context. I've been in the legal aid community for many years, first as a legal aid attorney and then as a technologist. And I'm thrilled to be here with Shellie today. I represent, as he mentioned, CLS, but also Microsoft's camp. But I'm a Google lover too, so both sides.
And I am Shellie Reid. I'm the manager of the Legal Services National Technology Assistance Project, more fondly known as LSNTAP. And so you may know me as Shellie from the email. And we provide technology training and education to legal aid and legal services organizations across the country. I'm an accidental techie. I've always been a tech lover, but I don't have formal training, but I know how to dig up information and find answers. So that's what I bring to this, and I can coordinate and help people find the people that can provide the real technical answers. But I've always been that person that in an organization that people come to when they have technical problems. So I do have some expertise, and if it was my choice, I would be using Apple products. So that's who who I would represent if it was my choice. As we go in today, we're going to be talking about um, the best practices for document collaboration. We're going to talk about ensuring compatibility between different systems when you have to collaborate with someone who's using a different platform. We'll talk about maximizing collaboration tools for the legal team, and we'll give you some shared resources and community forums, and we'll also ask you to share some of your favorite resources as well. And then we'll have a question and answer period and wrap up session at the very end. We're going to start the session today with a poll, and we just want to know who's in the audience today. So what platform does your office use? Are you a Google Workspace office, or are you a Microsoft office, or do you use a combination of other kinds of platforms? So if you would like to participate, you'll scan that QR code that's on your screen and it will take you to Slido. Or you can go to slido.com in your browser and put that 7-digit number, that 3638238 number, right in the browser. And then we'll start seeing the answers. I'm going to go ahead and click and let's see what's coming up. Right now, Microsoft is in the lead.
All right, so a lot of Microsoft users. And a couple of Google Workspace doesn't have a bad representation. Sorry, Shellie, there seems to be no Apple.
Not really surprising in the legal aid, legal services space. Oh, Microsoft is continuing their lead. So we'll just give it just another moment. And if you prefer not to use the tool, you're also able to drop your answer in the chat if you don't care to use the polling app. All right, well, I think we can see that we do have a majority here of Microsoft Office users. And now, this is a different question. If you could choose the platform used by your office, which would you prefer? So this is if you got to choose, what would you use? So let's see if the answers change. Oh, oh, yeah, we're getting a little bit more.
There's some variability there. Oh, look, Apple Apple was doing well for a minute. I feel like we're watching horses.
That's funny. And Sandy in the chat said no apple juice for me for the last question. So that's great. Interesting. So
Okay,
it's a
so
little
a
more
lot more
balanced.
varied. Yeah. You still got some Microsoft lovers, but certainly some more Google people.
Well, and the other interests me too. What platform is that? So if you answered other and want to share what platform
Drop
you
it in
would
the
use
chat.
and drop it in the chat, that would be great. All
They
right, it
probably
looks
build
like
all
it
their
has
own
settled down
platforms.
just a little bit. Oh, and also if you're using Slido, you don't have to reopen the app every time. If you just keep your phone open, when the new question comes up, it will show on your phone, so you don't have to scan that QR code each time. All right, so in preparation for this presentation, I did a very unofficial and survey on LinkedIn, and we asked, how do you collaborate on documents when you're working with people outside of your organization or just within your organization? And I thought it was very interesting. 24% of people are still using email attachments. And I hope that if that is you today, that by the end of this presentation, you might consider using a different kind of collaboration tool. The other tools that were represented or that I asked about were Dropbox or third-party apps, SharePoint or OneDrive, and Google Drive. So 43% of the respondents for this very unofficial survey say they use SharePoint. I thought that was kind of interesting.
I hope none of my CLS people used email attachment because I'm constantly telling them not to attach things via email. But yeah, we're going to talk about that a little more in the future or later in this presentation.
Well,
So
we're going to ask right now, how do you collaborate on documents? So we had LinkedIn telling us, but now we want to see how our audience is actually collaborating. So this is going to be a word cloud. So it'll be fun to see which one gets bigger and bigger. SharePoint is leading the way right now.
directly sending to the other party. So I'll take that for email sharing, email attachments.
Google Drive is getting some representation. Different depending, absolutely. So, we talked about emailing, and I would say emailing is not necessarily and probably not the best way to share these days. There are much more collaborative tools, and we'll get into that a little bit. Let's see. Print, and then JK, just kidding. That's funny.
I feel like that could have been Sandy.
Microsoft Cloud, definitely. And that probably is SharePoint or OneDrive. And it also probably depends on who you're collaborating with. If you're collaborating with someone within your organization, your method is probably going to be different than if you're collaborating with a client or someone from another organization. All right, so I think we can move on. We've got a pretty heavy leaning toward SharePoint, which makes sense that since Microsoft was capturing the audience. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about best practices. And we're going to do this using some scenarios. And our scenarios are we have a client who would be accessing documents on their phone. We have a coworker who would be accessing documents by SharePoint. And we have a pro bono co-counsel attorney across town who will be working with you, but they may or may not be using Microsoft products. So as we talk about this, let's think about those scenarios and we'll use those tools to help you start thinking about how you would use different tools in different times. So go ahead.
I'll jump in with if you're collaborating within Office. So I'm gonna tackle that email attachment. Those people right now. So if you're collaborating within Office, usually you're sharing something to either a manager for approval or edits, or asking for someone for feedback, or sharing something for knowledge purposes, like, hey, I'm working on this accounting, this budget, whatever. Usually, because the opportunity there is to have feedback, collaboration, have them add to it, you want to be sharing a link rather than the document attached via the email. Couple of reasons. One, if you attach it via email, you can't update it later. So if you have an idea and you're like, oh no, I misspelled that word, or oh, I should go and change this line item, you then have to reattach it and send it again. Whereas if you send them a live link, it's always the most up-to-date version. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I tell people this all the time, you cannot recall something once you've emailed it to somebody else. Not completely, at least. If I go to send something to Shellie, but I accidentally send it to a different Shellie, if I've sent it in a link, I can go to the link and unshare it immediately. And I can then make that document safe again. If I have emailed an attachment, I cannot go and make it safe if I've sent it to the wrong Shellie. And so, especially within Office correspondence, you want to be sharing links, and you do that because it helps with collaboration, it helps with security, and it's just overall best practices in terms of you're no longer storing a bunch of shared documents in your Outlook account or in your Gmail account.
And I want to make sure that everyone understands that sharing links means that you are linking to the actual document in whatever platform that you're using. It sounds like this audience is going to be mostly SharePoint or OneDrive. And just in general, if you're not familiar, SharePoint is usually organization-wide sharing, where OneDrive is a personal cloud storage just for an individual. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of basis. And you also need to think about, are you sharing this with a coworker or are you sharing it with someone outside of your organization? Because the security settings that your organization sets may may cause problems for someone outside the organization trying to access that document. So even though we're saying use this method, you have to also check with your technology staff to make sure that an external user would have access to the SharePoint site, or they may prefer some other method. For example, here at LSNTAP, our IT department, we are a Microsoft and a Google Office. We have both workspaces available. But for external sharing, they will not allow SharePoint access to external users. So we use a Google Drive access for people outside of the organization. So you may find that your organization has a similar method, or perhaps they prefer to use a third-party app like Dropbox. So think about who those end users are. You also need to think about the purpose of the collaboration. If you're working on a brief for the courts, say with a pro bono counsel across town, um, you know, working in Google Drive with a Google Doc may not be the most optimal way to work. But what you can do is save a document in Google Drive as a docx, as a Microsoft Word file, um, which helps to retain the formatting for Microsoft Word. And I guess we should talk a little bit about the different tools that are available in Microsoft Word versus Google Docs. Do you want to give your side of why you would use
Sure.
Google Docs versus Microsoft Word?
So I grew up using Word. I think it's an extremely robust platform. Obviously, Google Docs came out later. I think they have really encapsulated the most useful things that were in a word processor. And so, if you need a simplified sharing tool, a simplified document generation tool, I think Google Docs is fully appropriate, free access, easy to use for the most part. And so it may be a good opportunity for your clients if they need to write something for you. If you want them to, hey, just write me a letter about everything that actually happened, but you don't want them to email that to you because you don't know how secure their email is. Sharing a Google Doc and saying, hey, just write it here, it may be a good call. That said, if you have really complicated formatting, let's say you have a judge that has very specific formatting requirements that may not be encompassed or easy to replicate in a Google Doc, that's when I really think about Word. When I need a more robust word processing software, that's where I think Word kind of edges Google out.
I would agree. So when you need to be able to format documents at multiple levels and outlines and things like that, Word is going to be the easier. But for clients who may not have access to any kind of Microsoft Office product, Google Docs does give them, with a Google Drive or a Google account, everyone has a free Google Drive, and that includes most of the basic Office suite products. So that would allow clients to view documents. I
We
mean, we're going to
have
talk about permission levels as we move through the presentation.
Yep. So I see Jody's question. Jody asked in the chat, how secure are Google Docs? I'll do a quick answer now, and then we'll touch on it more later on. Google Docs, if it's the free version, is as secure as Google lets it be through its licensing agreement at any given moment. I don't want to give a blanket statement going forward. However, if you have a business subscription to Google Workspace, then it is equally as secure as Microsoft. You're going to see the same types of protections and parameters around that. And so if you're thinking of using it for business, you want to ask your IT department whether or not there's access to a Google business account.
Absolutely. And there's also, this is a good time to mention third-party apps like ClickUp, which is a project management software. And within ClickUp, you're able to edit documents directly. So whatever platform you're using, Microsoft Word or a Google Doc, you can edit those right within ClickUp as opposed to having to go to some other place. So that might be another way to give access to a third party. I also want to talk about shadow IT, and shadow IT is the use of IT devices, software, services without the ownership or control of your IT department. So as we talk about collaboration tools, I want to just put a plug in for making sure that you follow your policies of your organization. We certainly do not, are not suggesting that you don't refer to those technology policies when choosing different products. It's always a good idea to make sure that you're staying um, within the policies that your organization has set. All right, moving on to ensuring compatibility. So this is a good one. And
So part of the reason for this presentation was the idea that some people use Microsoft, some people use Google, you can use Apple products. And uh, if I were to send someone a Google Doc and they needed to print it in Word, how big of a headache is it going to be for them to format it or maintain the formatting across systems? This is where it really starts to get a little nerdy about the way in which you save the files. And so Google Word, so the file name where it ends in .docx, that is going to make sure that it converts and stays formatted appropriately for a Word file, even if it's on Google Drive in a Google Doc originally. If you store everything on Google Drive in a way that it can be accessed offline, it is going to automatically make it a .docx file. And that is going to make it easier if you want to maintain charts or tables or any kind of formatting if you're converting from one file type to another, or you're collaborating with someone who uses Word, but you're a Google shop. Don't make it hard on yourself. Just stick with the docs file. Um, some people get stressed out by using new platforms. So if you have someone who is a Word lover, they may or may not be comfortable with Google Docs, either have them share a Word file with you through their SharePoint so you can collaborate, or like I said, choose the Docs file structure on Google Drive. That way, when you share it, they're seeing what you're seeing.
and also when you are deciding what platform to use, think about what the other party needs to do. Do they need to be able to edit, or do they just need to be able to view the item? So you can give permission levels based on what they need to do. And I do recommend deciding who is going to be the owner of that document and know who is in control. And the owner can set the permission levels. They can change the permission levels later. If you need to start by having other people edit the document directly, you can always change those settings. Google has the option to set time limits on the sharing so that it automatically expires after 30 days, for example, which is a great tool to use if you need to give short-term access.
One of the things we're talking about today, or primarily what we're talking about today, is sharing within offices or with pro bono attorneys or with clients. But if you're someone like me who does a bunch of presentations, here's a pro tip. If you are doing a presentation and you put together a presentation in whatever your preferred platform is, whether it's Google Slides or PowerPoint, but you don't know what the people who are going to be hosting the conference or that presentation are going to allow for, especially if you're on site as opposed to through Zoom. Pro tip, export that presentation to a PDF and use that as the way you present, because you can guarantee that a PDF is going to be applicable across all of the different platforms. You don't have to worry about whether or not it's going to scale appropriately on whatever screen size, or whether or not they're going to say, oh my gosh, you have Google Slides and I only have PowerPoint, or I only know how to use PowerPoint and whatever. So export slides to PDF to carry them with you for presentations at conferences.
Yes, and as you're traveling, making sure that using that offline mode is a great way to make sure that you're able to work on things like on the plane, for example. So um, both Google Docs and Word give you the option to work on things while you're offline and then automatically update those documents once you again have internet access. So, but you have to be a little more proactive about it in Microsoft products. You have to enable that offline use. All right, so some other things that you can do for making sure, let's talk a little bit about sharing. So permission levels. What how would you handle permission levels, Ellie, for someone who, say, for a client that just needs to access a document and view it? What kind of
So
permission would you give?
first, if I just need them to look at something, and this is whether they're a client or if I have put together my Ellie's awesome projects for 2025 and I don't want anyone to touch it, I just want them to look at it. I'm going to send them as a viewer file, which doesn't allow them to make comments or edit anything. Do not touch it. It's perfect because I made it. Um, However, there are different levels. Viewer is like the most restrictive, where it's like see but don't touch. But there's also commenter, and in Google Drive, I do a lot of this where it's commenting. And so last weekend, actually, I presented or I worked on in a writing competition, and I shared commenter status on my draft because I didn't want people to go in and edit directly what I had written, but I did want them to be able to write, copy a line and say, hey, I didn't understand what you were going for here, and leave a comment so that I can go back and fix it myself. And so I think commenter status is when you still don't want sticky fingers all over your work, but you also want people's feedback. And an editor mode is when it's like, no, I have no idea. I want all the edits. I want all the feedback. We are doing this collaboratively. It's not Ellie's document and Ellie's awesome projects. It is Shellie and Ellie's document, and we are working together on this. And that's when you really use editor mode. Um, at least that's kind of how I approach it.
That's pretty much how I do as well. So, how much control I'm willing to give up, or how much sharing I want to do. But the great thing about these collaborative tools is that you can always go back and view the version histories and see what changes have been made. And that eliminates, the old issue of naming um, conventions and making sure what version are we on, and people working on different versions of documents, and then all of a sudden now you have multiple documents and you don't know which one is the one that's ready to go. So that is one of the best parts about being able to do live collaboration.
I think another one final comment I have about collaboration is that several of the people on this meeting may have interns, or their IT staff may, and their IT staff may be like, no, we're not making them account for either finance reasons or security reasons. So if you have an intern, or you have somebody who's coming to shadow for a week, and you're not going to make them a Microsoft account or a Google account because you don't want to pay for it for no reason. The way that I approach this is that I will make a folder in my OneDrive or SharePoint, depending on which is appropriate, and I will share just that file or just that folder with the person. And I will say, you go here through your own browser to edit, comment, do research, whatever. And that way I still control the entire ecosystem they're working on, and they're just working through a browser. And largely I don't always even care necessarily what device they're on. Now, of course, as the director of technology, I do care what device they're on, but if it's something where we're resource constricted, where we don't have a bunch of devices hanging around to give to people, that's one way to share and work collaboratively with people outside of your organization that may be working on sensitive things, while not giving them access to your entire ecosystem.
And that's an important point. As you're working with someone on a project, often there are multiple documents. So we've talked about sharing documents, but you can also share folders. And it's what we call waterfall permissions. And when you share a folder with someone, they have that same permission level for everything within that folder. If you only share a document, they're only able to see that document, even if it's contained within a larger folder with other documents. So as you're working with on a project, think about what level of permissions. Will you give folder permission, or will you just give document permission? Um, it's quite common to have problems with compatibility, especially if you're doing these copy paste from Google Docs to Microsoft Word. Um, so I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about solutions or prevention of some of these problems. With PDFs, if you're working with a PDF, make sure that you're using the tools to embed your fonts within the PDF, and that's how you save it. You just go to, if you're working in Word, go to File, Options, and Save, and then check the embed fonts in the file when you save it.
Shellie, can I
Um,
jump in here real quick?
of course.
I just want to back up for those of you who don't think about fonts on a regular basis. Not all fonts are compatible with every browser. They're not all compatible with every website or every word processor, because there are some that are specialty fonts. There you go. And there are some that are cross-platform fonts, like those which almost every browser and almost every word processor are going to recognize. And so when Shelley's talking about making sure you encapsulate your font in your Adobe PD and your PDF, that's what she's talking about. Just wanted to make sure we clarified.
Other things are when you're working with very complex tables. For example, if you have a table of evidence and you want to share it, you can convert that table to an image and then put that image into your presentation, and it helps to preserve the appearance as opposed to trying to work, with a table within a slideshow. Sometimes it just is very difficult to do. The other thing is you want to verify that the image resolution that you are putting into your slideshow is going to carry over, um, you know, in the courtroom or in a conference hall, for example. Make sure that the resolution is big enough or good enough so that it's not blurry. Um, Ellie, I know you are really passionate about PDFs and converting PDFs, and you had a special PDF tool that you
Sure.
prefer.
I can talk a bit about PDFs. So I'll cop to it. I am not a fan of Adobe. I do not. I think they're a bit of a monopoly. I think they're a bit of a bully, and I don't love them. I think they also have a super over-engineered platform. And so I have been on the hunt for a platform that I liked better than Adobe, that still gave me, in the way that Google Docs gives you a slimmed down version of Microsoft Word, I wanted, what is the Google Docs of Adobe Acrobat? And so we found one at CLS. We use I Love PDF. Some of our staff members are still using Adobe Acrobat, but a lot of us are using I Love PDF, which is in our resources slide later. So don't feel like you have to rush to write it down. But it allows you to save things as PDFs. It allows you to convert PDFs to Word documents and do kind of all of the rudimentary things you would be thinking of how do I manipulate a PDF document? I want to add pages together. I want to sign it, all of those kind of core functionalities. And I find it to be really, really useful for even people who are less comfortable with technology to use that platform. And while I'm talking about it, one of the things I liked about it is that they take a I don't know, that approach to security, which I think is awesome. Their approach is that everything that is uploaded to their document is immediately and permanently deleted within 2 hours. And so the only time period that I Love PDF sees it at all is basically while it's there, while you're manipulating it, and for the final 2 hours after that, and then it's gone forever. And so because they operate as an amnesiac software, it's a really, really privacy first way to do work.
Awesome. And it's great to have options to the big companies.
Yes.
So we showed this slide earlier, and definitely making sure that you're choosing fonts that have cross compatibility. But there's other reasons to use certain fonts. And one of the reasons I think of are for people who live with dyslexia. So if you have a client or a coworker who struggle with being able to read because different fonts are more difficult, there are dyslexic friendly fonts, and many of those also fall on the cross platform. So Arial, Comic Sans, Verdana, Calibri, those are all dyslexia friendly. Um, And Ellie, I know you have a thing about fonts.
I am a font nerd. I am. And so I learned yesterday about the dyslexia fonts. So now I have something else to add to my love of fonts. But from me to you, so here's another tip about fonts is that fonts were developed for certain reasons. And so Times New Roman, which is consistently required as system standard for a lot of courts, was actually developed for print media, which makes a lot of sense because it used to come out in the newspapers. It would come out in all kinds of written word uh, documents. And so that worked for a time, but the problem is a lot of documents that we have today are not intended to be printed out and read. And so Times New Roman is what's called a serif font. It means that if you looked at the actual fonts, it's got the little doily things at the ends of the letters. You want to be using a sans serif font, so no serifs, X-way, like ixnay on the serifs, if you are intending it for screen readers. And so Arial, Roboto, Georgia, Verdana, those are all sans serif fonts. And so they read a lot easier on screen. And so one of the things that I do, because I do a lot of resume reviews for people, is I tell them to move off of Times New Roman and onto a sans serif font, because most people are reviewing resumes through their computer or phone or whatever, but on a screen as opposed to printing them off. And so you really want to be thinking about not just who you're sending things to, but how they're going to receive them and how easy it will be for them to read them on that medium.
Well, I think we all know somebody in our office who would print them all off, but
Well, yeah, that some people would.
oh. So we also need to mention collaboration is also what we do with the courts, right? We're sharing documents with the courts, so that is a form of collaboration. So most courts want things submitted in PDF format. And in Florida, I understand that courts often require PDF-A. And I don't know if you know, but there are actually 9 different kinds of PDF documents. But Ellie, can you share us a little bit about PDF-As?
I sure can, Shellie. I did not know until yesterday that there were 9 types of PDF. That sounds horrible to me. Why did there need to be 9? But PDFAs are important because you can get to a PDF in several different ways. So a PDF kind of generally is like a locked document. It means hands off, don't touch this thing. And so if I write my crazy note and say like Ellie's the best and everybody else is awful, and I make a photocopy of that and then scan it and upload it, well, that's a PDF. The problem is it's really, really hard for computers to read that. And somebody can't necessarily go and search that document. So my manifesto that's handwritten and copied on the copier, suboptimal for court systems. If I want my manifesto to be able to be read by the court system, then I should use a PDF-A. What PDF-A is where it's going to take a Word document or a Google Doc and it's going to lock it down as a PDF, but it's also going to continue to make it searchable. And that way, if you upload a 75-page appellate brief, nobody's going to want to be thinking like, I remember somebody said something about this on a page. You want them to be able to search for it and find it pretty quickly. And so that's what PDF-A is. And that's why the Florida court specifically are trending toward requiring PDF-A. They haven't done it yet, but that is something that may be on the horizon. And so it's an important thing to know and certainly know how to do in whatever software system or in whatever word processor you use or PDF creation software.
So saving as a PDF-A and making that choice is easy when you're sharing documents digitally. But what happens when you have to send something for a signature and the only way for that signature to happen is with ink? Can we still get a PDF-A?
In Florida, you definitely can. So there are a couple of options. So I know a lot of legal aid organizations have I know DocuSign is a brand, but it's also kind of a generic terms, have DocuSign type platforms where you can send them a document, they can digitally sign it in those third-party platforms. So that's one way to do it. If they were in your office, you could use I Love PDF or Adobe Acrobat to do it. So in office, you could do it that way. Florida, though, recognizes certain digital signatures where you use the S/ or the S signature. Actually, fun fact, Florida recognizes any signature that is meant to be used as a signature, which is how people used to sign their names with X's when they couldn't read, because you didn't actually have to sign your name. It's anything you intended to be your mark. And so that S/ is a nice to have, but not a requirement. And so if you wanted to have your client sign something remotely, you could just have them type into the document their name or S/ their name as an intended mark saying they assent to whatever that document is, the affidavit or filing.
And if you do get those instances where it was printed out and a wet signature was used, you can scan those items. If your scanner has OCR capabilities built in, you can scan with OCR and then convert to PDFA. You also can take a scan and do the OCR procedure and then convert to PDFA as well. So lots of different options if you have to go through those hoops. Let's see. I want to talk a little bit about how we can maximize collaboration specifically for legal teams. We already mentioned deciding who owns the document. Use permission levels for waterfall access. If you give access to a folder, they have access to all those documents. We talked about making sure that you decide, is someone going to have permission to be an editor, or do you want them just to be a commenter or a viewer? And then we haven't really addressed this, but how do you use comments within your documents, Ellie, when you're collaborating with someone?
I was just about to go on a tangent about track changes. So comments and track changes is this perfect segue. I am really adamant that when people are editing software, that they should exclusively use track changes. So for those of you who have never used track changes before, you don't know what I'm talking about. What it does in either Google Docs or Microsoft Word is it allows me to see any changes that they make. I actually think it is a digital etiquette and certainly a professional etiquette to use track changes, because when somebody changes something, I don't want to go back through that document and be like, well, what's different? How do I know? Like I can go to version control, but I find that to be more tedious to try to roll things back or compare it in the little window than it is to just see in the line, oh, they changed, go back to return. Yeah, I mean, that's a better use of the word. And so I find track changes to be better than version control if you're actively editing a document. When it comes to comments, I feel track changes are primarily used for inline edits. So go back, return. That's an inline edit. It's happening in that point in time. Whereas if somebody wants to leave a comment and say, I don't even know why this paragraph is here, or this paragraph should be at the top of your essay and not the bottom. Any comment that's a general understanding, this is your weakest argument, you should consider cutting it or move it to the back of the line. Those are the kinds of things you want to see in comments, because it gives people the opportunity to respond to them. Because they can say, I understand it's a weak argument, but it's something the judge brought up at an earlier point, and I want to make sure I cover it in a place that they'll see. Well, that may rebut the reason that somebody had made that comment to begin with. And so commenting to me is an opportunity to share qualitative feedback on a document and also have a conversation about the document and off to the side and ongoing about how we can make it better.
So, you love that, but when you're assigning permission levels, do you make everyone commenters when they're sharing documents with you?
Never. I already mentioned hands off my documents. I know I'm only going to make people commenters, or I'm only going to give them permission to do track changes if it is something where I'm actively collaborating with someone. Maybe I am co-counsel with another person, or this is my manager and I want them to go in and actively review my motion for substantive changes, recommendations. And then I'm going to give them kind of the most liberal permission settings with still expecting those to be track changed, not just inline edits that I can't see later. Um, Commenters are often I would give to somebody who I just want feedback, general feedback, without necessarily them. Um, I don't consider them an active collaborator. I consider them someone who's giving me feedback on something I'm creating.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with the at mention feature. And if you're not familiar, at mention uses the little at symbol and you put someone's name. And if they're within your organization or in documents that you've shared, it will send an email letting you know, or send them an email that you have commented and directed a comment to them in particular. And love using it, but hate getting all those emails.
I was
But you
thinking the
do.
same thing. I love to at other people, but I don't so much love when people at me because then I
Yeah,
know I have to go
absolutely.
review things. But I still think it's very useful, and I love that you brought that up. Yeah, the at symbol is a way to tag certain people to come say, "Hey, can you review this paragraph? I have a question about it."
Yeah, it's a great way for giving tasks to law clerks, for example. You can, if you at mention them, then give them the tasks that you need them to do if they need to do research on a point. But yes, and you do have controls that you can control the emails. You can go in the settings to limit those emails. And I believe you can also eliminate them, but that's probably not also the best practice either. So there's good and bad about all of them. So lots and lots of resources out in the community. And we want to, as we continue talking, we would love for you to share in the chat some of your most loved resources so that others can benefit from them. I want to give a little bit of a plug to LSNTAP. LSNTAP.org is our website. We have tons of resources available, and these many of the resources that we're going to be mentioning in the next few minutes are going to be listed in the slides. So you can access them there. You don't have to try to write them all down now. But what are some of your most loved resources, Ellie?
So I know we're going to talk about them, some of them later, but I love PDF. It's a new find, and I love it. I'm obsessed. Um, I am also obsessed with using LLMs. So those are the AI models. Um, OpenAI's ChatGPT. You have Gemini, which is Google's. And I mean, I could name them all, but that just make it a lot of sense. I, I'm sure each of you probably has a different policy with your IT department about what you can and can't use LLMs for, and or how you are allowed to use them. Nevertheless, we do allow people to use AI models for non-client confidential, non-client work information. And so if I was the pro bono coordinator who was sending a solicitation email to an attorney that said, "Hey, I'd love to know if you're interested in taking a pro bono case. We haven't heard from you in the last 6 months." Some of the things that I will do is I will frequently throw that generic email without the person's name in it into an LLM and say, "Hey, make this kinder, make it more professional, make it shorter," and just see what it comes up with. More often than not, I don't love its final product, but I like the changes it's made in that they made me think about a new way to say something. And often I will then go and tweak it between the way in which I would speak and the way in which the LLM made me sound nicer overall. And have a hybrid approach to both of them. And so that's, you know, unrelated to collaboration, but sending a nice email to take a case is one way to help collaboration. And you can't use these if people don't want to collaborate with you.
I agree. And obviously, this is not an AI focused session, but I mean, can we actually talk about doing work as an attorney without mentioning the great tools that AI is providing? Um, so let's move on. I'm not seeing a lot of information, but as we move through, maybe it will spark some ideas. Please share those ideas with others because we want to make sure that people have this information. One of the things that LSNTAP is doing, I think, is worthy of mentioning, is we're creating a database of communities of practice. So we are actively seeking submissions for that. So if, as an attorney, if you have found a community that has been helpful to you, we would love to hear about that so we can make sure that we can share it with new attorneys and also with other attorneys across the country. So we've talked a little bit about PDFAs and Florida bar requirements or Florida court requirements. And the Florida bar has created all kinds of resources on this and trainings that will help you. So if you need a little bit more information in depth on creating PDFs and PDFA, we are listing those materials in the slides for you. And we also, here are some things. The LSNTAP collaboration toolkit was created this past year, and it has all kinds of things to think about in collaboration. It also has some helpful things for your IT department because our IT staff may not always think about how attorneys have to work with people inside and outside of the organization. So this was designed to give many perspectives on how attorneys have to work with collaboration. Um, so it may be helpful for your organization. We also have The Lawyer's Guide to Collaboration Tools and Technology. This is a book written by Dennis Kennedy and Tom Mile. And if you're not familiar with their podcast, I highly recommend it to hear what they think about is going on in the world of technology. I added this Microsoft 365 collaboration video. It's a really good overview of collaboration tools available in Microsoft products. And then the Chicago Bar did a Google Docs training again that does an overview of many of the tools and the collaboration tools available through Google products. So those hopefully will help you learn more. Do you have anything that you want to mention here, Ellie?
I totally was thinking of something while you were talking and then forgot. So it'll come back to me. And, oh, that was the other thing. The Harvard Law Library has a ongoing project. I think they call WARC. If you are, especially if you're doing appellate work and you have to cite to a internet document, one of the problems in court cases is that those documents tend to change URLs, or the URLs go away. So part of the Harvard Law Library's Internet Archive project has provided permalinks for things that you're citing to as evidence. And so if that's something that anybody is interested in, I can get the link for that. This is so that if you are sharing a document as part of a brief or as part of a motion and you say, hey, here's a file or here's a web page that I'm relying on, there will be a permanent link that will last indefinitely, even if that core website changes over time. So that's one of my new finds that I'm excited about.
So giving another perspective, the Wayback Machine and registering your website or links with the Wayback Machine is also another way to preserve that material. So if you're not familiar with that, it's very simple to submit something to be archived for future reference. Here's some other information that we've provided for you. Information, a link to the I Love PDF, and some directions on how to password protect PDFs, because that is also something, kind of harkens back to the days of sending things by email. But if you do find that you're doing that, at least make sure that they're safe when you're transferring it. And then we wanted to reserve a few moments for questions and answers from the audience. So this is your chance to pick our brains. One of my fun old things that I used to listen to was the car guys show on PBS or on NPR, sorry. And they had the Stump the Chump series. So see if you can stump us with a question.
And while you guys are considering stumping the chump, I'm gonna drop my LinkedIn link in the chat. In case anyone wants to connect, feel free to do so.
And we also have our emails here that I'll just go ahead and display.
Perfect.
But we'd love to talk about any questions or any time that you've run up on a situation when you're collaborating. Maybe we have a solution for you. Do you have recommendations for document review software?
Document review software. I am not sure that I understand the question. Shellie, do you?
Well, I was going to say it depends on what kind of document review you're doing. If we're comparing documents, um, Microsoft Office Word and Google Drive both have tools that you can use to compare documents side by side. If you're talking about document review as far as hundreds
Discovery.
of pages of documents that you have to review for evidence and finding things, that's a different discussion. Everlaw for Good is a e-discovery platform that provides their tool to legal aid organizations at free or low cost. I believe it's free, but that is a platform that could be used for evidence document review. Let's see if they gave us a little bit of
Yeah, I think they were
clarification.
mostly talking about document review for e-discovery.
So I would look at the Everlaw for Good.
Another one. Okay, so this isn't discovery. Liquid text is something that was discussed at CLS, and we did a small pilot with liquid text. It is a PDF annotation software. And so while if you have thousands of pages, you're going to need a e-discovery platform like Everlaw. But if you have 75 pages and you know you're going to read it, that's where the briefs are. Liquid text is something that I know some of our advocates at least tried, because they wanted the ability to annotate and write on the side of digital documents in the way that they would if it was printed. And some people really liked the platform, and other people were like, it doesn't work for me as well as just commenting digitally. And so you may have to experiment with what works for you, but that's another one that I know we've tried.
And if it's not like documents that don't have like personally identifiable information, if it's generic documents that you just want to compare and contrast, generative AI tools are very good at comparing documents and giving summaries of the differences between the two. I have a friend who recently uploaded health insurance plans into a generative AI or chat GPT, and asked chat GPT to provide what was good and bad about each of the plans to help her make decisions on healthcare plans for her family. So I think there are lots of tools available. It just depends on privacy and what your limits are there.
I see that we also have a chat or a question in the Q&A. So Kara Miller asked, now that judges review documents on their computer screen, do you suggest we switch from Times New Roman font? I suggest that you listen to what the judge requires first. If they require you to use Times New Roman, then you have to. However, if they do not, I think another sans serif appropriate, like professional font, like Arial, is what I would be using, but it depends on the judge. Great question.
And Mary is asked, how does Everlaw for Good work with external collaborators? And Mary, I don't have that answer for you. I do know that Everlaw is a very large actor in the legal tech space, in the greater legal world. So I'm sure that their tool has those capabilities, but I don't know the specific answer. If you need, I'm happy to provide contacts directly to the Everlaw for Good program. We did an interview, a podcast interview with her name is slipping my mind right at the moment, but she does talk a little bit about that with our podcast that's available on our YouTube channel. But happy to help you get connected with them.
All right, I don't see any other questions at the moment. If for whatever reason you did not get to ask your question today, feel free to send it to us via email. We'll make sure it is addressed. This is a huge plug too for LSNTAP. I always get it wrong, Shellie, so forgive me for that. That's not. I've tried multiple ways, but they have an amazing listserv. And right now I'm looking at a lot of great conversations about a lot of different topics, and it's a great resource for the legal aid community. I dropped the link in the chat for how to sign up. There's also that's going to be in the resources. So I highly recommend you sign up for that listserv. And whenever you have questions, suggestions, ideas, that's a great resource to use to start those conversations. And with that said, I did drop the CLE code into the chat. I will read it out loud in a minute just in case. But a huge thank you for both Shellie and Ellie. We appreciate both of you being here with us and sharing your knowledge with us. The training was approved by the Florida Bar. The CLE code is 2411849N. I will drop it in the chat as well. It's going to go out via email. And thank you all, everybody that attended today and participated. If you were not able to attend live, thank you for registering. We will be posting this on YouTube, so make sure to share with other people. We appreciate everybody's time and your engagement. And if, as I said, if you didn't get a chance to participate or ask a question today, feel free to send it via email and we'll make sure that it is addressed. So thank you again. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.